Okay. I want to welcome everyone to the December 17th Village of Buchanan Planning Board meeting. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I wanted to welcome Jen Bacher to the planning board. Jen was appointed, I believe, 2 months ago by the mayor. Just wanted to thank her for willing to participate in the village government. It's very difficult to get people to volunteer for different boards, whether you're running for office or appointed board, but it's very hard to get people to commit the time and be willing to try and help out. So I wanted to thank her and welcome her to the board.
Thank you.
The first thing on the agenda is the approval of the November 19th minutes. Are there any additions or corrections for the minutes?
I have a correction. Eileen is listed as both an attendee and absent.
It's kind of hard for her to do that.
She is pretty
Yes.
busy, but
Not that much.
Okay, I have a couple on page 3 on paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the third line where it says Chairman Murray. Do you see it, Rosemary?
No, I don't have a hard copy.
Okay. So on the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth paragraph, where it says Chairman Murray asked them to indicate if on the plan and also note the location. And the next sentence should be, the fuel tank will be a tank within a tank. Not there will be a tank within a tank. It's the fuel tank will be a tank in a tank.
Okay.
All right. On the next page, page 4, on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9th paragraph, second to the last sentence, it should just say there will be no monitoring wells. Omit the rest of the sentence where it says because these existing monitoring system PET. It makes no sense. And I watched the meeting before we started, and I don't know what that was referring to, and I don't believe that was actually said. So if you could just omit the second half of that sentence, it should say there are no monitoring wells, and delete because this existing monitoring system PET. Okay, does everybody agree with that one?
Yes.
What's that last word you said?
The sentence should just read, there are no monitoring wells. Okay, and then the next sentence should be, the pad is 90-foot elevation.
Okay, thank you.
On page 5, last paragraph, it should state, Chairman Murray recognized Robert Thompson of 221 Tate Avenue, who stated he spoke with John Pizzella about wall construction. The wall was not constructed by John Pizzella. So it should say the wall was built by should be omitted, and it should be inserted he spoke with John Pizzella about wall construction. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
2 more, actually 3 more. On page 6, the 8th paragraph, the last sentence, the words should include for insurance coverage in the event of failure. The sentence should read, a possible solution could be drawing up a resolution that would be transferable with the deed and sent to Westchester County for insurance coverage in the event of failure.
Say that again? The sentence?
Just add for insurance coverage in the event of failure.
Okay.
The last paragraph should read, Chairman Murray acknowledged that there can be certain inspection criteria to determine failure of the wall. So you have to omit certain rules regarding failure. There's no rules regarding failure. It's certain inspection criteria to determine failure of the wall. So you just get rid of regarding.
Okay.
All right. The last sentence on the same paragraph and same page says village engineer Palmer stated that they will set the criteria and do remediation. That's not, you have to get rid of the word remediation and insert inspections. The sentence should read village engineer Palmer stated they will set the criteria and do inspections.
Okay.
Okay? And last but not least, on page 7, where it says agenda discussion, there's a sentence in there that says belts will have PCBs that Con Edison will try to rectify. What was said was some components of the transformers may contain PCBs. So omit belts will have PCBs that Con Edison will try to rectify and insert some components of the transformers may contain PCBs. Okay?
Yep. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any additions or corrections to the planning board minutes of November 19th? Hearing none, can I have a motion to accept the minutes as amended?
Motion to accept the meeting notes as amended.
Motion made by Tracy. Is there a second?
I was absent, so I'm abstaining.
Okay, well, if you guys, if either Eileen or Jen watched the meeting, that would suffice to be able to vote on because you did watch the meeting, although you did not participate. Is that correct,
Okay.
Stephanie? Is that allowable under the New York State law?
You know, I don't know that offhand, but I would suspect if they're comfortable, they watched it, they're comfortable enough with it, they can approve them.
Okay, as long as Jeff seconds it, we can vote on it, or if Jen wants to. Jeff,
I watched it. I'll second it.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next on the agenda, we have a public hearing for a site plan amendment at Entergy for the installation of the efficy pad. Now, I don't know how many people are going to be calling in or are viewing this, so I just wanted to go over some ground rules for the public hearing, which we'll be following. We're going to allow any speaker to speak whatever they want to speak on, but they're going to be limited to 3 minutes. Okay? They will be recognized and then they can speak for 3 minutes. If any board member has a question of the speaker while they're speaking, that time will not be included in their 3 minutes. So I would encourage any board member who has any questions of a speaker to wait until that speaker is done speaking to ask the questions. And that time that we're questioning or we're engaging in that conversation will not be included in the 3 minutes. All right. Once somebody has spoken, they cannot speak again until all people have already been recognized and if time permits. I would love to be able to have everybody talk as much as they want and as many times as they want, but it is just not conducive to having a productive meeting, and we do have another public hearing on. So with that being said, Marcus, can you track the time? Do you have the ability, or do you want me to do it?
No problem. I can do that, Chairman, as well as when the people raise their hands. You let me know who you want me to whoever you want to call in.
Whoever raises their hand first, just put them on. I forgot how to look at who's the attendees in the
Yeah,
meeting.
if you go, Chairman, if you go to the bottom, it says participants. You click
Okay.
on that, and then you'll see a table to your right. You see
Okay.
panelists and attendees.
We have 35 people. So can I have a motion to open a public hearing for site plan amendment at Entergy for the installation of an independent spent fuel storage facility?
Make a motion, we open.
Have a
I'll
second?
second. I'll
All in
second.
favor?
Jeff?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the public hearing is open for Entergy. Would Entergy like to give a brief introduction for people who might not have been able to, or who have not been involved with any of these meetings, and to brief anybody from the public who might want to comment. Would you like to speak, Ted, or another Entergy representative?
Yeah, I could just say a couple of words. Obviously, we're here for the spent fuel storage installation annex, so to speak. There's already one presently at the site that was approved many years ago. I think it was 2004. And this is the storage of the fuel that comes from the spent fuel pools to a dry storage canister and gets placed on this. It's most like, I can't say exactly, but most every nuclear site has a necessity by now. I think everyone has. It's necessary because obviously this fuel has to be put in a dry condition to leave room in the spent fuel pools. So that's essentially it. It's a concrete pad with security fence around it. It's very simple. There's no moving parts. It's been done many, many, many times in sites all over this country and in Europe and in the Far East, Russia, Ukraine, it's India. These are very common installations. That's it.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to open it up to any members from the public who would like to make a comment.
So just to let everybody know, anybody wants to speak, there's a little option to raise their hand. Please raise your hand. Then I'll unmute you so you can ask any questions. Chairman, you should be able to see everybody raise their hands as well. If you let me know if you see anybody as well. I'm looking, I don't see anybody yet.
I don't see anybody raising their hands, no. Do any board members, while we're waiting for any members of the public, Mr. David Stallman, he sent, as well as George Palmer, sent out comments based about the SWEPs, as well as the comments to the plans. Wanted David and George to, if they have anything they would like to discuss with Tim or Ted, to go ahead and talk about the documents that you guys had sent out.
George, I have no comments to make other than what I put into the resolution, which we'll go over later. So do you want to go over your SWIP comments or?
They're pretty straightforward. We had several technical comments. We discussed them with the applicant's engineer. He didn't think there was an issue with any of the comments that we made. We don't believe there was anything that was unaddressable or major that they couldn't, that would cause a significant change to the plans. So that's where we're at with the technical comments. Unless Tim wants to add something to that. Tim from Cronin Engineering.
And Mr. Chairman, the comments that George made in his memo of December 11th are included as conditions in the resolution of approval, the draft resolution.
Correct.
Chairman Murray, if I might, this is Tim Cronin, and it was our office that put together the plans that you're reviewing tonight for the Assistant CAD number 2. And Mr. Palmer's correct. We spoke with him earlier this week and went through his comments. And as he stated, there's really nothing there that gave us any great pause or concern. So the plan that we submitted for this submission for this planning board meeting is very similar to the one that was submitted for the November meeting. In addition to that plan, we also put together the SWIP, which George commented on, as well as the full EAF Part 1. And as was mentioned by George, a few technical comments and everything that was there we discussed. And as he mentioned, there's nothing really of significance that we really should be very simple for us to address. And being a condition of a resolution, if one is adopted, is certainly a reasonable approach.
Yeah, generally what we do, we approve the documents with the caveat that the comments will be included prior to the issuance of the CO. So we don't want to hold everybody up for a couple of months at a time for things that are somewhat innocuous. I still don't see anybody listed to raise their hands or anybody who has requested to comment from the public. Do you see anybody, Marcus?
Nope, not at all. No questions that I see at all.
All right. So do any of the board members have any questions of Entergy or any clarification they would like from David or George or Tim or Theodore? I'll open up to any board member who would like to have any questions that they feel haven't been addressed in any of the documents that have been submitted by our consultants.
Hey, Sean, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The existing storm water management basin that goes through a treatment plant presently now?
No, it's a pond that contains stormwater to lessen the peak flows coming from the GSP as well as the parking area. And what we're doing is replacing that pond in the existing parking area, which means we're lifting up some of the impervious material that's there and putting the pond in the parking lot. So the area tributary to our new pond will be less than the existing pond. And in addition, the impervious area tributary to the new pond will also be greatly reduced. So the flows coming from the new pond will be much less than they were from the existing pond.
And presently, that body of water that's going out to the Hudson, that's not tested at any time or to a treatment facility or something there now?
My understanding, that water is not tested. It's just water pretty much from the driveway, from the parking area, as well as from the roof of the GSP. And it will continue to be the same water.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Jeff, years ago, New York State changed the stormwater management. I believe that was in the early 2000s. And whenever you construct an impervious surface over a certain area, a large enough area, you have to control its runoff so it doesn't go directly into navigable waterways or into other waterways. So if you notice in newer parking lots, you'll see ditches around the parking lots, and those are actually runoff areas for the parking lot, so that all the runoff that would come from cars or anything will stay basically on that site and not go into the different waterways. Correct me if I'm wrong, George.
That's correct. There's treatment practices all around parking lots and other facilities for anything new. And the threshold that you mentioned is 1 acre, and we're over that 1 acre in this application.
So since we're over that 42,000 square feet, that's why I had to do the stormwater management evaluation and change those retention ponds. So now that they meet the new criteria based on the site disturbance.
And we're not going into any new flow paths or waterways or in a different direction. It's actually all following the same direction as the existing FISI pad.
Yeah, I thought in the plan there was something about treat. In the, I forgot what figure that was. I was reading, it said something about the water was going through a treatment plant or something.
Mr. Fayel, if I might, with the new FISI pad, we do have to accommodate the water quality volume, and that will be done through a series of infiltration trenches located around the perimeter of the new FISI pad. But there is no treatment for the existing runoff. There will be treatment for the new runoff from FISI pad number 2.
That's a passive system. It's not a mechanical or chemical system. It's a passive system that's installed around the pad, correct?
That is absolutely correct. We want to keep it as simple as possible, as least amount of maintenance or zero maintenance as possible.
So basically, Mother Nature is filtering out everything for us.
Correct, but you know it's runoff from a concrete pad, so we're not expecting to have many pollutants come from that water source.
Anything else from any of the board members?
Yeah, I have a question about the soil testing. George, you mentioned the soil testing. Is that for the drainage? Different soils will drain differently and therefore using a different mechanism?
So, yeah, so there's percolation rates, and the applicant's engineer has to verify those percolation rates through testing. That's the testing that we're referring to. So it's how quickly water flows through there. As Mr. Cronin mentioned, their infiltration trenches. They have to, they make some assumptions, and then they have to go out there and verify them at some point.
Okay, and I have one other question. Why did this make reference, number 16, to the City of Peekskill and Riverview Place development?
That was an oversight on our part. It was the document we used was previously used for that project in the City of Peekskill, and it was a matter of cut and paste. So that will obviously be corrected.
Okay.
And just to put it on the record, there was a mistake about the fire protection. The fire protection is provided by Verplank Fire District, and I took the plans, the prints, as well as the notice of the public hearing, and hand delivered them to the commissioner from Verplank Fire District. He in turn gave them to the chief, and I explained to them how to get on to the meeting, or they could write comments, and I haven't heard anything from them. I did tell the commissioner that I was going to say that I did hand deliver it to him last week, actually a week and a half ago, about 9 days ago. So, I know it's not a requirement, but it has been the planning board's practice that whenever anything happens in a different fire district, that we notify them for their input. So just wanted the record to reflect that Verplank Fire District had been notified of the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Thank you very much.
Does anyone else from the board have any questions or comments? And I see nobody raising their hands from the public. So that being said, if there's no one who has any more questions, I make a motion to close the public hearing for the site plan amendment for Entergy for the construction of the independent spent fuel storage facility. Have a motion?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Who seconded that?
Yeah.
Sean,
Who made the second?
No, Jeff did.
Jeff seconded it, and was it Eileen, you made the motion?
No.
Tracy.
Oh, Tracy did, okay. And it's unanimous.
I just want to let you know that 8 notices were sent, 6 were returned, and 2 were not returned.
Okay. So now we have the resolutions for the negative declaration. Stephanie, would this be an appropriate time to make a motion to determine this, to authorize a negative declaration?
Mr. Chairman, Stephanie, may I?
Sure.
The first, now therefore be it resolved, part of the resolution actually adopts the negative declaration in advance of the approval.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to read all 4 pages.
No. Why don't we at least go over the dispositive?
Sure, be my guest. Yes, sir.
Maybe the middle of page 2, we could begin with now therefore be it resolved.
You want me to read them? I didn't print them out. I just read them on the internet.
Actually, I've got it right here. Do you want me to read it?
Sure, be my guest.
Okay, I'll start with item number 2 on page 2. Pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act regulations, the planning board hereby adopts the attached negative declaration for the reasons provided therein. And we can go over those in a bit. And then it says, the planning board hereby adopts this resolution of amended site development plan approval to the proposed project as described above and as shown on the above listed application materials in accordance with the provisions of Article 7 of the zoning law, subject to the following conditions being fulfilled prior to the planning board chairman inducing the amended site development plan drawing. So the first thing, well, there's some boilerplate, but let me get to the more important stuff. 3C, the stormwater pollution prevention plan shall be such that it meets the satisfaction of the village engineer, including the fulfillment of the comments in his memorandum dated December 11, 2020, and any subsequent memoranda which may be issued. And item D on the next page, on page 3, the environmental assessment form for the project shall be revised so that in section C.4, the fire protection service applicable to the project is identified as the Verplank Fire Protection Association. And then item 4 is a boilerplate paragraph regarding the payment of fees by the applicant. And then we have a paragraph regarding, I'll read it instead of trying to paraphrase what it says. In accordance with section 211-29C3 of the Buchanan zoning law, this resolution of amended site development plan approval shall become null and void unless a building permit is obtained within 1 year of the date of the adoption of this resolution. Further, this resolution shall also become null and void unless the applicant completes construction pursuant to the approved site plan within 3 years of the date of the adoption of this resolution. And then item condition 6, in accordance with section 211-29C4 of the Buchanan zoning law, If the planning board chairman has not signed the final site development plan within 6 months of the date of the adoption of this resolution, due to the failure of the applicant to meet the requirements and conditions established herein, this approval shall become null and void. The planning board at its discretion may grant one additional period of time not exceeding 6 months for the applicant to meet said requirements and conditions. And then we have a condition which basically says that no building permit or CO shall be issued for the project except in accordance with the approved amended site development plan. No further modifications to the site shall be made without prior approval of the planning board. The applicant must return for approval from the planning board if any changes to the endorsed plan and or this resolution of approval are desired. And then a couple more boilerplate items here. And that's essentially the resolution. And then we prepared a part 2 of the environmental assessment form and part 3 as well. And then we have, and I know you don't want me to read this, we have.
You can read it, no, Dave, read it all. You spent a lot of time typing this up. And you guys spent a lot of time, so it's great to be able to hear your work. I know I read it, and I'm sure everybody else read it, but I don't want you to feel slighted.
I don't feel slighted, but I'll just sort of paraphrase through the reasons for the negative declaration. So, or the conclusions anyway. The first has to do with no significant adverse environmental impact with respect to the construction on or physical alteration of the land surface of any properties, and we give a reason for that conclusion. The next conclusion is the proposed action will not have a significant adverse environmental impact with respect to any unique or unusual landforms, and a reason for that. Third, the proposed action will not have a significant adverse environmental impact on any wetlands or other surface water bodies, and a reason therefore. Fourth, the proposed action will not have a significant adverse environmental impact with respect to new or additional use of groundwater. It will not have a significant adverse environmental impact with respect to the introduction of contaminants to groundwater or an aquifer, and the reason for that. The next has to do with no significant adverse environmental impact with respect to lands subject to flooding, then air quality, then with respect to flora or fauna, with respect to agricultural resources. Next, no significant adverse environmental impact with respect to scenic or aesthetic resources. Then with respect to historic or archaeological resources. Then with respect to the loss of recreational opportunities for the village. Then with respect to any significant environmental area. No significant adverse environmental impact on existing transportation systems. No significant adverse environmental impact as a result of the increase in the use of any form of energy. 15, the proposed action will not have a significant adverse environmental impact as a result of an increase in noise, odors, or outdoor lighting. No significant adverse impact with respect to human health from exposure to new or existing sources of contaminants. We say the whole purpose of the project is to protect human health from exposure to spent nuclear fuel rods. The project will utilize state-of-the-art technology designed to store the fuel rods in a stable and non-contaminating manner. No significant adverse environmental impact as a result of being inconsistent with adopted land use plans. I'm almost done. No significant adverse environmental impact as a result of being inconsistent with existing community character, and no significant adverse environmental impact with respect to the supply of housing in the village. So as a result of all these reasons, the planning board is making a finding that there will be no significant adverse impact upon the environment from this project, and that a DEIS does not need to be prepared, and that the seeker process is now complete.
Thank you, David.
Yes.
There's one thing I wanted to add. There will not be any tree clearing. If some of the members of the public and some board members might remember, there was a proposed construction of a senior family housing across the street that involved clearing of trees, and it limited the amount of time where they could do construction because of an endangered species that was in the area. One of the reasons why that does not pertain to this site is because there will be no clearing of trees, and it does not impact the same animals that live in the same area because you won't be destroying their habitat. It's already a cleared area. Okay. And one other thing, George, I know in one of your submittals you had asked for a construction schedule. Do they have to supply the construction schedule prior to the issuance of the building permit or prior to the issuance of, well, anything, basically?
It's a construction sequence. So it'd be the order of they put down silt fence, then they do their installation of their pad, and then they, grade around it, they do their drainage, and then they come back and put grass seed on everything. So that's their sequence. And in the last meeting, we talked about the overall construction sequence, and the applicant went through the timeline of that. So they don't have to submit that to us, but
Okay.
that's up to them. They have to meet their timeline, and as
Okay, I thought that was a requirement that you had for some inspection purposes. So we don't have to wait for that sequence in order to authorize the construction of the pad.
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Anybody else have any questions of David or George? All right, at this time, I would accept a motion to accept the negative declaration and the motion as written and spoken by David Stallman. Can I have a motion?
I'll give the motion.
Eileen made the motion to accept the declaration as David had read. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so once all of the documents are submitted that are requested by George and David, we'll sign the documents and issue the building permits. Okay?
Great.
Am I incorrectly in the procedure, Stephanie?
No, you adopted the resolution, right?
We adopted the resolution, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So there's nothing else for Entergy for now?
That's it for tonight.
Okay,
Thank
so,
you all for what you did.
all right, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Good night now.
Great job.
Good
Very much.
evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have a continuation of public hearing for a steep slopes permit to construct a modular concrete retaining wall on a property at 226 Travis Avenue. We're going by the same rules that I had spoken for Entergy. It'll be 3 minutes per person. You'll be able to ask the applicant questions. I encourage you to ask those questions after the people have spoken who wish to speak on this public hearing. So can I have well, we already continued it, so I don't have to reopen the public hearing. So Mr. Calabro, would you, in case there's somebody who has not been involved with the debate of this issue, would you like to give a brief summary of the proposed project?
Yeah, backside of my property, wasn't able to be used by me. So I discussed it with Mr. Thompson about doing a retaining wall. He had no input on the matter at the time. So we went and got the engineering, got the permit, submitted it to the building inspector. Building inspector approved the engineering. We started the building process. We invited the building inspector and the village engineer out to come inspect the base of the wall, so they can see for themselves that the proper drainage was going in, that the wall was being built properly, and that we were using the proper 1-inch stone made for drainage. Once they okayed the start of the wall, I proceeded to finish, finish building the wall up until I got a stop work order. And from then on, other than seeding and throwing as much material down to prevent any runoff, we did. So it's pretty much up until we come up with an agreement at the bottom of the wall. I didn't put the fence up until I know that the bottom of the wall was satisfied with everybody. So once it's all finished up and everybody's happy with the plan, you can finish the wall and get it closed down, permit.
Okay, thanks. Does anybody from the public wish to speak? Rosemary, I didn't receive any letters from anybody. Was there any letters that I would have missed that somebody might have submitted to Village Hall?
No.
Okay. There again, Marcus, I don't see anybody raising their hands.
We got one. I'll allow them to speak right now.
Sure.
Mr. Rob Thompson.
Okay.
He should be able to speak now, Mr. Thompson.
Can you hear me?
There you go.
So, going back to Brian's thing, when we initially started, it was supposed to be a small retaining wall, you know, just to hold back runoff or whatnot. And then next thing you know, we heard nothing more about it. And now we have this big monstrosity in the back. And we've been through it. We looked at multiple ways and everything like that, and we couldn't find the drainage. Like, I looked at the wall, I looked at a couple different angles, and now with the new ladders, we can't even see like if the wall is shifting or anything. So, you know, I just wanted to clear that up. That was only supposed to be a small retaining wall, not a, you know, not a 7 foot, 8 foot, 9 foot wall in the backyard.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Thompson? Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Did Mr. Thompson contact anybody when he saw the immensity of the wall as it was being constructed?
Yes, he did contact the building inspector, and there was some discussions. And I don't know how much we can go into that, Marcus, because of the disciplinary process that incurred. But the village, the village
all right.
was
I just
notified. Mr. Thompson did reach out to the village on several occasions. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marcus.
That's absolutely correct, and that's why the stop work order was issued after some of the complaints. That's correct.
Any other board members have any questions for Mr. Thompson based on his comments at the public hearing?
Mr. Thompson, what are you really looking for?
What we're looking for is, one, there was nothing wrong with what was there. The property was, you know, like everything in Buchanan, you got hills and everything like that. It was a natural break between the two properties. Now we got like Sing Sing in our backyard. So, you know, I understand now everything's disturbed, erosion, we're going to have to come up with a solution, but, you know, with how the wall is and everything like that, it's, you know, an eyesore, you know, and it's, you know, I had numerous people look at it, and I have a background in it, but it's not constructed right. No matter what the build, his engineer says or whatnot, it wasn't built right, and it's just going to end up falling down over time.
Okay.
I did go out and look at it. I know that Jen went out and looked at it. I don't know if Jeff did or Tracy. I know Eileen, you probably didn't. You're still convalescing at the time.
Sean, can I respond to that?
You can respond to anything you like, sir.
Good afternoon, good evening. How is everybody? My name is Dave Garcia. First off, which Thompson is it that's speaking right now? Is this the actual owner, or is this somebody else? Because this doesn't sound like the same Thompson that was on the last.
I believe it was the same. It's the same person who was in the room with Mr. Thompson. It sounded like his son to me, who has the same name.
So it's the son that's on. Okay. With respect to what's been occurring there, the plans had been filed. Both George and Anthony had gone to the property and had reviewed the work that was done. And I think at one point the discussion was that it may not be pretty, but it was to code. And the reason why it wasn't pretty is because one thing that we failed to mention is that, you know, Mr. Thompson has a structure on Mr. Calabra's property. And in order to keep the structure from literally running into the Mr. Thompson structure, I believe it's a shed. The wall was curved just a little bit inward to allow for Mr. Thompson to keep that shed on Mr. Calabro's property. But the plans, it was engineered. I mean, Dan Ciarcia had spoke at the last conference regarding, that he's willing to put his stamp on it, that the property, that the wall itself was properly engineered, that everything that needed to go into and behind the wall is there to allow for the proper drainage. And so, with respect to code, the wall is structurally sound. I believe Mr. Ciarcia is on with us this evening. I did speak with him earlier regarding, what the work that was done there, and he's willing to put his
professional license on it.
He has professional license on that wall. And, legally, if anything happens to that wall, there's only one person that's responsible for it, and that's Mr. Calabro. So that, I understand that, Mr. Thompson was talking about having some other individuals at the property and haven't taken a look at it. But the fact of the matter is that Mr. Ciarcia did provide plans. The plans had been followed, except for the fact that, it's got that curve in it. So the wall is up to code, and if anything should happen to that wall, there's only going to be one person that's going to be responsible, and that's going to be Mr. Calabro. And so I would like the board to take that into account.
Well, that's why we had asked you to get together with the village attorney to write some type of document to be attached to the deed to be filed with the county, so that if Mr. Calabro sells his house, the new owner understands his responsibility in regards to maintenance and liability in regards to failure.
And that's fine. And at the time when that was suggested, I thought, I was more than happy to work with that. However, that kind of a amendment or attachment to a deed just opens up a whole host of problems. And legally, it doesn't change anything with respect to whoever owns that property. Assuming Mr. Calabro decides to sell tomorrow, whoever buys that property tomorrow is going to be responsible for that wall. And so, having spoken to, I deal with judicial title, they're recognized, they're well known here in Westchester. They do a lot of work in Westchester, and after having gone back and forth with their legal department, that was not a viable response to essentially what's being sought by the village, or at least by Mr. Thompson, in terms of protecting him.
So what you said, it opens up a lot of legal issues. Could you give me an example?
Well, quite frankly, they were unable to even provide. First of all, there's no precedent for that kind of a attachment to a deed. And more to the point, it doesn't change the legal aspect of what it is that the village is seeking, which is responsibility for that wall. And so, at one point there was also a discussion regarding, an inspection, regular inspections of that wall to make sure that the wall is structurally sound and is not shifting in any way, which, quite frankly, that's fine. I mean, after speaking with Mr. Calabro, that isn't a problem. We're certainly more than happy to indulge the village that way, Mr. Thompson as well. We can do that for a period of time, as George had suggested, at the last meeting. But judicial, their legal department had indicated that they had never done anything like this, and so to the extent that the village was seeking to attach something to his deed, how do I say other than nobody's ever done anything?
Well, we've
like
attached
that
things to deeds before. We've attached things to deeds before, such as accessory apartments, such as business. We've attached plenty of things to deeds.
Correct, but with respect to the wall, the question becomes, what is it that we're looking for with respect to the wall? Are we looking for someone to assume responsibility for the wall? Well, it's there. I mean, legally, he's responsible for the wall. He's the owner of the property. He's owned, and if he sells it tomorrow, that obligation runs with the property. And so, to attach a deed to say what the law already requires, and then to have Mr. Calabro have that deed or that attachment, and then to have to explain that if and when he should sell the property, creates that issue at that time. And so, for banking purposes, the property may not be. It's almost the equivalent of like an oil tank, underground oil tanks that now banks aren't will not lend on unless that tank is removed. And the same issue.
That's only some lenders, okay? That's not universal. And that's only some insurance companies. That's not universal. So the crux of your argument is it opens up a plethora of problems. Basically, is if he goes to sell it, he doesn't want to explain why there's a rider on the deed. Is what you're telling me.
Well, to a bank,
that's what you're saying.
Well, to a bank that's not his bank.
Okay.
To a bank that's somebody else's bank.
Then
if
just say that.
If you want to buy the property, Sean, and then your bank says to you, or the mortgage company says to you, listen, Mr. Murray, we're happy to do this for you, but not with this on the deed.
So that's what you had to say. We didn't have to talk 15 minutes over 2 meetings for you to say that. That's all.
Well, but this is the first time I had.
We talked about it last month and you agreed. Now you say no.
Well, what I agreed to, Sean, was to say, okay, fine, I'll look into it. I'm more than happy to look into it, which is what I did. And I did do that. And so now, we're at the next appearance, and so I'm responding to that question.
Okay.
So, with respect to that's, I just wanted to point that out and, raise that issue.
Okay. Has anybody else from the public got online or sent an email or got on Facebook, anything? I don't see anybody, Marcus.
Nobody's raised a hand. Nobody's put anything in the chat box either. So nothing from the public.
Okay. So I'll accept the motion to close the public hearing for the steep slopes permit for the property located at, what was that, 221 Travis Avenue? Oh, no, 226 Travis Avenue.
226, correct.
I have a motion to close the public hearing.
A motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, public hearing's closed. Now, I have I went and looked at the property in question, and Mr. Garcia, you said that the wall was built as per the codes. It's not built per the codes. It's not built for the Village of Buchanan codes. Although the previous building inspector said it was okay, right on your prints it says all walls shall be installed in accordance with local building codes and requirements. A simple search of the height of a wall in our building codes or the installation of a fence would have seen that is not true. Okay?
Sean, and you're correct. I'm sorry.
Okay? Also, a simple search when you're doing anything on a hill of steep slopes, you would have noticed that there might be a good reason to ask a question as to why I can build something on a over 35% grade. Sorry, Stephanie, I didn't mean to hit a nerve. So, the assertion that it's built to code, it might be built to the engineer's specifications, but not as per the local laws.
I understand it. Sean, I stand corrected. That is correct. I spoke too soon. You're correct. You're right. Both George, and at the time it was, I believe his name was Anthony, was the,
Anthony was a building inspector, yeah.
Correct.
George doesn't have any authority for the issuance of fines, violations. George is a consultant. Anthony might, I don't want to speak for George, but Anthony might have asked him to come in and look at this, see if it's okay. But Anthony is the person who was charged with interpreting the codes and interpreting the laws.
Correct.
I'm sure there's precedent out there that when one village official interprets the laws incorrectly, it doesn't mean it can stand in perpetuity. Okay? So
understood.
I've always had an issue with allowing things to continue that I know that are in violation. And I know that there are other village officials who feel the same way. And there is probably precedent out there that has reversed the authority of a village official when he has made an incorrect decision. Is that correct? Do you agree with that, Mr. Garcia?
Well, I would agree with that only to the extent that, you know, we're looking at an individual who was acting on that information. And, you know, if Anthony, as the building inspector, is saying, listen, what you're doing is fine, you know, you're good, you're okay. And the individual, in this case, Mr. Calabro, continues and completes his work or tries to complete the work in accordance with those, you know, with that information, I think to a certain extent, the issue then becomes whether or not the individual, the homeowner, you know, was acting properly and not, you know, and not flouting, you know, what would normally be those rules that the village imposes.
Well, I agree with you that it's a difficult situation, and I do agree that Mr. Calabro attempted to do what he felt was right. I don't want to monopolize the time. I'd like the rest of the board members to ask Mr. Calabro or any of his consultants or representatives any questions that they might have based on any of the reviews of the drawings, site visits, or anything else.
Hey, Sean, I have a couple of questions.
Sure, go ahead.
They were supposed to meet last time to discuss about the facade?
We had asked Mr. Calabro as well as Mr. Thompson to submit to the village so that we can act as mediators on any type of the facade and beautification, anything to make it more palatable, the appearance to be more palatable. I went down to Village Hall 2 days ago. Neither person had submitted any of the documents we had requested, and that's why I had asked Rosemary again if anybody had put anything in writing to the village, and neither applicant had done that, or neither party involved in this application had done that. Let me put it that way.
All right, the second question is, did George go back over there and get some measurement points in case the stability changes?
Actually, no, I didn't go over there only because I was waiting for this meeting to find out the outcome of how to move this process forward before we do that. So to your question about the wall failing or whatnot, once we establish what we're doing, then I would set that criteria. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Jeff, I went over there last week or a week and a half ago, and it is impossible to look at the blocks because the lattice that was put up. The lattice blocks any of the seams, including the bottom, the top. You can't see any of it. So even if George were to put together inspection points to measure distances or movement of the blocks, you would not be able to do it with the lattice that's installed right now.
Yeah, you'd actually have to remove it every time you measure or something to that effect, which I don't know how feasible that is, to your point.
Well, if I may, if the wall is going to move, you're going to observe movement at the top of the wall. The bottom of the wall isn't going to shift. So, you know, in that regard, there could be points, surveyors, pins or PK nails put in top of the walls in a couple of locations, and those locations could be checked over time. Because the face of the wall, you know, it's not going to bulge out in the middle. If it's going to shift, you're going to observe it at the top. That's where it'll be most, the easiest place to observe movement of the wall.
Did you get an opportunity to go over there and look at it, Jeff?
No, I didn't get a chance, but I did have a question for Dan about the drainage pipe that goes on to let the water out. Does that go underneath the block?
It runs along the face of the wall, and I believe it daylights at the, as you face the rear of the building, the right-hand side. Is that correct, Brian?
Correct.
This is where it came out, right?
Yep.
When I went over the other day, it was buried. I couldn't find it.
I put rocks in front of it, but I can always open it up and.
Could you repeat that? We can't hear you.
I covered it up with rocks, some big boulders in front of it, but I can always clear the boulders and access it.
Any other board members have any questions for the applicant?
What were the boulders put there for?
Just
Why
to
did
hold,
you,
hold back the dirt? Because it's on the outside.
okay.
So that's on the neighbor's property then?
Nope, it's on mine.
And your print showed that the wall goes right up to the adjoining neighbor's property.
If you look at the picture and the engine, we actually had it go like right up to the property line, but when we built it, I built it with room on the inside of the property line. So it's actually, the wall is actually not as far, it's not at the shed. It's closer to the inside of the shed, so it stays on my property on both ends.
Anybody else have any questions for them? Okay, like I said, I did go over to the property the other
I
day.
have one question.
Go ahead.
I have a question, sorry.
Sure.
So, I know last time you talked about putting a fence. So what's your plan for finishing up this project? And has Mr. Thompson looked at it? Is there gonna be other further issues?
So we don't plan on having any further issues. I tried reaching out to Mr. Thompson and also his son, actually tonight again, to talk to them about the bottom part of the wall. My property goes down about 6 feet past where the wall is. So pretty much the entire shed is, all but a foot of the shed is on my property. So what I wanted to do was talk to Mr. Thompson, pretty, like bottom retaining wall. He has a railroad tie wall that's a little rotted out in the bottom, so I wanted to talk to him about cleaning that up so I could put arborvitaes along the base of the wall. So once Mr. Thompson can reach out to me, and I know on my part I was supposed to submit a drawing, and I got a little jammed up with work and forgot. I was kind of hoping to have a conversation with him, just as neighbors, to say, instead of me submitting something, then him submitting something, if we can just talk and come up with a conclusion amongst ourselves that we could finish it and, clean up the whole base of it so it's better looking on his end as much as possible. So as soon as we have that conversation, I can finish the top. So I can access the bottom from the top now. Once I finish and put a fence up, I can't access the bottom anymore with my equipment.
And then where do you plan on putting your fence up, I guess? Are you putting it directly on top of your wall, or are you putting it back on,
probably about
from the wall?
2 feet back from the wall. So just, so I have room to walk on because I don't want it on the wall, just, room to get on both sides of it if I ever have to. But the fence is, for protection purposes, so people don't go wandering off of it. About 2 feet in front of the wall. I like to put the fence.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Stephanie, but the code says it has to be 10 feet from the wall.
That's correct. Well, depending on the height of the wall, and since the height of the wall is way too high in terms of what the code says, the fence then would have to be 10 feet away. Combined fence wall is 6 feet. If you're gonna put a fence, it has to be 10 feet away. It's in the code.
If you're putting that fence 10 feet away, is it going to act as a safety fence? Because I thought that was the purpose of the fence.
If it's gotta be 10 feet away, I might not even do a fence then.
What would provide fall protection?
Well, we had asked, go ahead, I'm sorry.
In the engineering, the fence is on the wall. For the approved permit, the fence right on the wall, which was approved. So that, depending on going with that and giving myself some room. So that's what I'm doing with what was in the planning.
Can I ask if it's in the plans, how high was your fence gonna be on top of the wall?
And the plans,
I don't think the plans say.
Sorry, I can't hear.
I don't think the plans say. I think it just says proposed fence.
are you, 4 foot, 6 foot. I plan on putting a 6 foot fence.
And I have a question about the fence on the wall. Will putting the footings for the fence interfere with the structure of the wall? Because don't you have to then drill the fence posts into the wall?
Well, that's why the plan on going 2 feet or a foot or two in front of the wall, so I don't have to drill into the wall. But I don't think it would have any effect if I did.
Anyone else have any questions?
Does his
Okay.
engineer, Sean, his engineer have any statement about what Tracy questioned Bernie about?
It's actually
Dan?
supposed. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up, Mr. Palabro.
Marcus has sent the email to my brother, not myself. So I got mistaken for Bernie instead of Brian.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. I apologize. I just wanted to know if your engineer had anything to add regarding Stacy's question about the fence being put on top.
First off, the fence, I believe the code requires that a safety fence like that be at least 42 inches high. We could verify that. But to the question about how it would be mounted, these blocks are, the top of the block is 2 feet thick. So if we were to install a post, it would be core drilled, which wouldn't crack the block. So it wouldn't really interfere with the structural integrity of it. Because it's in the wall, predominantly, really, the blocks are designed not to slide, but they really work by gravity. That's what really holds the wall together is the weight of the massive blocks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, like I said, I did go out there and look at it. I walked around. There was a couple of things that I really didn't care for when I saw. I went there after a rainstorm, and on the eastern or westernmost part of the wall, there's a chain link fence that's tied between the trees on a neighbor's property to hold back the dirt that's fallen down. There's a lot of dirt and rocks that were collapsed that are falling down from where the top of the wall, because that wall on that side only goes in 1 or 2 blocks, and the runoff is going into the neighbor's yard. And like I said, somebody wired a couple of pieces of fencing together to try and capture it. Underneath that are stumps and organic material that's prohibited from being placed in the field by our code, and that's all underneath there. It looks like it was maybe some trees or some stuff that was in between the neighbor's property. That is dumped in the back of the other neighbor's property. And like I said, the drainage pipe was covered up. I don't know where that fill came from, but it's full of glass. And there's a lot of glass in there. There's pieces of porcelain in there. It almost like it came from somebody's construction site. I don't think that meets Mr. Garcia's fill criteria that he's listed on his prints. I walked through there. There was pieces of plastic in there. There looked like there was like a little tea set from the kids. There was pieces of cups and saucers and glass. So where did that fill come from, Mr. Calabro?
So some of that stuff that was there from way before I owned the property. I've been trying to clean up this property for the past 7 years. That chain link fence has been down there for a while. That was down there way before the wall got started.
That fence was just put up. It was just put up there. It was put pieces of wire are wrapped onto saplings that they're ripping the bark off. It was just put there. That wasn't there forever. There's no way. The bark was just coming off. There was still green underneath it.
Yeah, it was put there before the wall was installed. That was
okay. Well, that's not proper silt fencing, and that's on a neighbor's property. Okay.
But is that neighbor here tonight to complain about?
I'm just giving you the observations that I had seen, and I know that's wrong.
Sean, let me ask you this. I mean, what would you recommend that be done at that eastern end of the wall?
It's collapsing. It's coming down. The wall itself is there, but all of the material that is not held back by that wall is going into the neighbor's property. It's wrapped around a tree that's into the fencing. And underneath of that, I did kick the dirt around. There's stumps. There's pieces of tree in there. So, you know, that doesn't.
Well, let me.
That's not proper construction techniques. If I know anything. You know.
Can I offer to the village then an opportunity for myself and Mr. Ciarci along with George to go take a look and then figure out a way to remediate that?
Well, it goes back to the type of fill that was installed.
That wasn't. You're talking about two different things. You're talking about the fill behind the wall, or are you talking
the dirt? The dirt that came down into the adjacent property was put on top of your property. During the rainstorm, it all ran down to where the chain link fence is, and is also covering up your drainage pipe. In the center of, okay, my observation must have been wrong. I'm sorry.
Well, you know, Sean, I mean, we had this conversation not too long ago. It's like, you know, if you have any questions or if you want to come on my property, you want me to point stuff out to you, I said, please call me. Let's have a conversation. I'll meet with anybody. Just go down there. I can point out anything you want instead of jumping to conclusions or making assumptions about my property. And
I'm not jumping to any conclusions. I'm reporting you my personal observation.
Okay.
That's just an observation. It's not a conclusion. It's an observation. And based on my observations, I asked the question. I didn't jump to any conclusions. I said, where did it come from? How did it get there? Who installed it? That's not jumping to a conclusion. That's asking a question.
Sean, is it possible that some of that dirt may have been there already? I don't know.
Nope.
The eastern end of the wall, I'm not sure about. I've not been there. I've not been over to that section in quite a while. I would ask if that is the case, we'd be more than happy to meet with George. We'll have Mr. Ciarci present, then we'll figure out a way to remediate that. Now, with respect to, you know, where.
I'm sorry. Did I say east? I meant west. I'm sorry, not east west. I meant west.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah, my mistake. No, the drainage where the drainage pipe comes out, it's the west, and that's where the trees are. It's all in the west. I'm sorry. That was my mistake. It's when you're viewed from Thompson's house, it's on the right-hand side.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that would be west. My mistake.
Hey, but again, we're still, you know, I will meet with you. I will meet with Dan present, you know, and with George also. We can do this with George and figure out a way to remediate that and correct that.
All right. And also on the bottom, now this is definitely on the east, as viewed from Thompson property on the left. On the first course that's exposed, there's at least a 1 foot gap between the blocks that is filled with rocks. It's not even filled with rocks. There's a huge gap. The blocks are not interconnected at all. So I don't know how that could have happened, but you know, you could reach your hand in there. It's at least a foot, if not more.
On the you're talking about on the same side?
No, on the opposite side.
If you're on Mr. Thompson, if you're on my property, you're talking about
on the right. If you're on your property, it's on the right. If you're on Thompson's property, it's on the left.
There's no, in the top of the wall, there's no gap.
Oh, the bottom. First course, bottom.
That would just allow for any water that got on that side and the proper distance to run a dead man properly.
You want to say something, Stephanie?
Constructed with keyways in the bottom of them. There's a keyway on the sides that, you know, one side goes in, the other side comes out 2 inches. The top of them have a 2-inch, you know, channel that goes up, and the bottom have a 2-inch channel that go inside, that run the length of the block. But also the block has a channel that runs perpendicular. So once that channel is, you know, perpendicular, it has to sit specifically on a certain spot of the other block, you know, adjacent to it, in order for, you know, to be locked in properly. So in order to get that distance set properly, so the keyways are on one another, you know, that's why that had to be put there. But you know, also it's, you know, you got, you know, out for plenty of drainage and whatever else runs through it. Critters.
Does anybody have any other questions for the applicants?
I have a quick question, if you don't mind, just from my notes. The steep slopes that were disturbed are what? Are they 30%, 35%? That's probably for the engineer, or George, unless, in case you can tell me.
They were greater than 35, there were some that were greater than 35%. They were all over 15% with an average, I think, of around 30%, if I'm not mistaken, George.
Yes. Dan, you can confirm that as well, right? Dan?
He's
He's
on mute.
muted.
Mr. Ciarcia?
He's muted.
There I go. Yeah, we did it based upon the slope categories in your code. So the last submittal we gave you, I believe it was in excess of, we did the two categories, and just bear with me a second here. We did 15 to 30% was colored in yellow, and 30 and beyond was red.
If I'm not mistaken, the majority was red, right?
In the wall area, yes.
Is there a way to regrade that?
Well, that's something that we'll have to discuss with the board members, Stephanie. I just wanted to have everybody to have the opportunity to discuss any questions they would have with the applicant and their representatives.
Okay.
Then I would like to talk with the board, decide, there's a couple of options that we have here. But I would like everybody to get their questions out before we
Okay.
start discussing things.
I have one question as well. It was mentioned earlier that there would be Mr. Calabro mentioned a smaller, the railroad tie retaining wall might be replaced with another wall. How high would that wall be if one was placed on the property line there?
Well, the one that's there now. Go ahead, Mr. Calabro.
I was going to talk with Mr. Thompson about it, and that was pretty much whatever him and I can agree on. It didn't have to be much, like under 3 feet. I think that will give us plenty of room to allow for nice landscaping to go from the top of that wall to cover up, a decent portion of the base of the wall in question, so we can plant the proper vegetation over there to keep everybody happy.
If that was 3 feet, how much wall would be left on the wall that you have now?
Probably, let's say that the wall's 5.5 foot high, the majority of it, so it probably 4.5 foot high. So it wouldn't be very, very tall anymore. You'd be covering a lot of the base.
Thank you.
And George, just for a little clarification, it's not shown on the drawings, but from the base of the wall, you go out approximately 4 feet, there's another wall with those railroad ties that go down. It looks like for probably between 2.5 to 3 feet. You understand? There's a flat grade, 2.5 to 3 feet, flat grade, and then the wall. It's like a step. So if that area were to be excavated anymore, that would be below the foundation of the newly constructed wall. That detail is not shown on his drawings either, though. So
yeah, that comes into question with the actual steep slopes. Mr. Ciarcia, was that area surveyed, or was that, because that's not shown on the survey, so the steep slopes that's over 30 and under 30, how accurate is that, is my question.
Well, we went with the survey that was recently done. So we used that. The survey really didn't go, pretty much went up to the property line, so we really didn't have a lot of data beyond the property line. But that's how the steep slopes are computed, and that's how the wall is designed.
So when you say you don't have a lot of data, what does that mean? How many points did you have to work with to determine what was steep and what wasn't, or what the slope of the grade? I'm sorry.
I mean, how many points did the surveyor shoot?
Yes, yeah.
Well, that's, I could give you the survey. The survey has the shots on it.
Okay.
But
Because I
think,
I didn't see the railroad tie retaining wall on there, and I didn't see the
no, it wasn't on the survey.
no, which
Can I-
changes the grade.
George,
a
can I
little
ask you a question? Is it
Yeah.
possible that wall that you're talking about with the railroad ties, is that on Mr. Calabro's property or is that on Mr. Thompson's property?
bit. It looks like it's on Mr. Calabro's, if I'm not
But-
mistaken.
Oh, I guess it's really on the line. I was waiting for the surveyor to come back out to stake it properly. But it's pretty much just on the property line.
It's not staked at all right now. Were there stakes someplace in there?
I was hoping that the surveyor was going to. We got the, left to right, but he never did, the backside of the property. He never did the Thompson's end.
So you paid to have your property surveyed and staked, and they only put in half the stakes? Because you
Yeah.
have to request the stakes. They don't
Yeah.
come.
It was, hindsight, I probably wish I hired somebody else, but he, like I said, trying to get him back has been tough.
Does anybody else have any questions before the planning board starts to deliberate?
Yeah, Sean, I just have one last question for Dan. How did you choose that size of block?
The size, that's a standard precast retaining wall block. The 2 by 2 by 6, I believe.
And that wasn't referred back to what the codes were in the village? To choose
Well,
that?
again, this goes back to, your building inspector is kind of the gatekeeper. We provided plans and none of these issues were raised and a building permit was issued. So, if there was a comment, we would have addressed it.
Understood, thank you.
I do have one more question, I'm sorry. We had asked you, Mr. Calabro, not to do any construction on the site other than stabilizing the walls, stabilizing the disturbed areas, as well as putting up a safety fence. And I drove by there the other day, and it looked like you guys had taken down some trees. Is that true?
We had, actually, those are, one of my neighbors would be 228. He had removed a tree, and while he was there, there was actually the tree was actually kind of on my other neighbor's property that he wanted down. So I was just kind of the guy with the access to it.
So it was your neighbors who removed the trees, not you?
Correct.
Were they big trees or little trees?
I guess depending on how you look at it, they're medium size, I guess.
Because there are codes about removing trees in the village, especially on steep slopes. You're not allowed to do that. If it's measured 4 inches or more, or 1.5 feet from the ground. And existing trees, if it's 8 inches in diameter, 2 feet from the ground, they need a permit too. So that might be something we should look at, but that's, if it wasn't on your property and you didn't do it, that's a different issue.
Right. There was a small maple tree on my property that was probably 6 inches in diameter. While they were there, I had them take it down. But other than that, the 2 big trees on either side of me from 222 or 228, I just let the guys, have that.
Understand. Okay, I'd like to talk with the board members now. There's 3 things that I see that we can do. We can either approve the installation of the wall and issuance of the steep slopes permit as it is constructed now. We can totally deny it right now and go back to the original configuration, or we can adopt it and with changes or modifications. Now, I know there's a lot of the members of the board are new right now. They haven't been involved with this process in a while. What we used to do years ago was when somebody violated the law knowingly or unknowingly, we asked them to return the property to the original configuration and start from scratch. I don't think that's a reasonable thing to even consider right now, even though we are considering it for another property, because what's different with this property and a couple others is that the engineer is willing to sign off on it. The other engineers aren't willing to sign off on it, so we've asked to total remediation of sites. Now, the other thing is, the wall was constructed as per the drawings, however, they do violate our laws. And there are other questions that I have personally of the type of fill and what's going on around the walls. That the silting, the water draining from the center of the wall, which I observed when I was there, the water draining from the western side that I observed, the runoff going into the neighbor's yard. That's some issues that I would have. I don't know how we would be able to remediate that, but that would be some kind of caveat that we would write into the resolution. But I want to know what the other board members would like to do or what they think is reasonable, whether there is a modification of the wall, whether there is some restoration of the steep slope. Right now, like you said, it was over 30%. Now it's a 0%, which is not allowed. But I'd like to think what we would have done if we had been involved with the process from the beginning. So I'll open it up to any board members of what their suggestions they might have. And you have to realize whatever we do right now will also affect anybody else in this situation in the entire village. One of the reasons why the steep slopes law was enacted and adopted, not that long ago, only about 15 years ago or so, 10 years ago, was because people were doing just what Mr. Calabro did without engineers, and it was collapsing onto neighbors' properties. They had railroad ties that were put in there that would fail after 10 or 15 years, and it became a big problem. So that's why this law was enacted. So when we deliberate this and come up with what we feel would be the best thing for the village and its residents, we have to keep these things in mind. What would we have done in the beginning? What is the intent, the legislative intent of the law, and what we feel would benefit not only Mr. Calabro, but the neighbors around him that would be impacted. So I'll open it up for open discussion of the board members. Anyone?
Yeah, I'm in favor of looking at modifications somehow or another, if that's even feasible.
Such as?
Such as, I don't have a such as right now.
Well, when you talk about a modification, you must have something in mind. Do you mean reducing the size of the installed wall and grading back to recreate some sloping? Or are you talking, or what?
Well, first of all, let me ask you a question, Sean. Are we going to vote on this? I mean, are we doing something with this tonight, or can we leave it open till January?
We can leave it open because we did close the public hearing, so we are on a clock to make a decision. If we make no decision within the allotted time by law, it's automatically. Wait, Stephanie, is it automatically approved or automatically denied? Stephanie?
Sorry. You know, I'd have to look that up.
Well, I know there's a timeline, and I can't remember if we
I can
go
look it up
outside
right
of
now.
Say again?
I'll look it up right now.
All right. So what I believe we have to make a decision within 60 or 90 days. Okay.
The only reason I say that is because I'd like to go walk Mr. Calabro's property, and I will be able to get up the stairs now to get to see Mr. Thompson's property.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we do have some snow, but you know, it should be, you know, maybe it'll be gone in a week or so with a little warm weather. But I'd like to go see that.
What other? Yeah, we don't have to. The reason why we made the decision on the entity property is because there was no open comments from any of our consultants, because there was no comments that were left open from the public, and we had the negative declaration. That was basically just an extension of what was already there. So it was a little bit easier. That's why we voted on it tonight. Now, this one is, and like I said, we generally leave public hearings open when we want more time to discuss matters. But right now, I think we're kind of at an input pass. I don't believe any other information that would have come from the public would change our decision-making process. So that's why I asked for a closure of the public hearing. Once we close the public hearing, now we're on a time frame to make a decision. So we don't have to make a decision tonight. Obviously, we can make a decision next month, or we could discuss it. Stephanie would have to write up a resolution for anything that we would discuss, and then we would vote on it. So what kind of modification would you think? Maybe removal of one of the blocks to bring it to almost our 6 foot and grade it back so that we're only disturbing maybe 20% grade instead of 30% grade, and keeping in the legislative intent of the steep slopes, or something along those lines?
Yeah, I would like to see that. And I'd also
Okay.
like to know if there's anything on Mr. Calabro's property in regards to erosion or anything that, aside from grass, any trees or any kind of anything that will be put on the top of the property that would help mitigate anything.
Sure, I understand. That is part of the approval process. We could ask for different types of beautification. That could be part of it. We've done that before, things like that. Jen, you have anything? I know you went and walked the property, and I don't know if you have any comments about it, or what you would like to see, or how you feel about it.
So, I mean, from what I think Mr. Thompson's biggest issue, or, is the fact that it's a big wall in his backyard. So I definitely would think that we wouldn't want to put a fence on top of that wall, because then it would be an even, now you're talking like a 5 foot plus another, 5 foot fence on top of that. And it would be like, a 10-foot wall. So I believe that he would not like to see that in his backyard. So yeah, I think something like what Eileen is saying, more of a terraced look, might be more appropriate. I know that Brian talked about putting a wall at the bottom where that, I guess, refurbing the wall that's already there. And that could kind of help reduce the height of the wall that we have already, that is already there. And I think putting, trees to make it not look like a big white wall would probably help from a view. And I would like to see Dave and Dan walk down the west side of the property for what you discussed about as far as the fencing and the grading over there.
Did you can you confirm my observations? Was what I was talking about correct? Was it there when you were there? The fence tied to the trees with the dirt coming down?
So there's definitely a fence there that looks more like a temporary fence than a permanent fence. That goes to Mr. Thompson's on the right hand, like his neighbor on the right. And it is holding back, brush that would move from Mr. Calabro's property down. I don't know when it was put there. I have no idea if it was put there when the wall was built or way prior. But I did see it, yes.
And that wall, according to the drawings, is not 5 feet. The wall, according to the drawings, is 7 feet 6 inches right now. That's what puts us over the law. They're only allowed to make it a 6 foot height, and according to the drawings, it's 7.5 feet. I didn't measure it.
Yeah, a max 7.5. But I was saying, if the bottom wall that they're talking about, that he would refurb, the one that we step up onto in order to get to the 7 foot wall, because that's kind of falling apart, right, where the railroad ties are. Do you agree?
Yes.
So if that could be built to something, we'll say prettier, right, and was almost like a terraced look, that would reduce the 7 foot height. That would be what I was thinking about. I don't know if it's 3 foot. I don't think it's that high, because I stepped onto it and I'm not that tall, but could be 3. I was thinking it was more like 2, but
Sure, 2.5, 3, yeah. So Jeff, what do you think?
Some of the things that I would like to see, I would like to see a complete property survey because it sounds like we don't have that. And then definitely address the erosion problem, especially on the west side, and somehow control the drainage so when it comes out from the wall that it doesn't erode the dirt underneath the blocks. And then, like I said, the facade. But if they do the survey and they're gonna do that little landing before it, maybe that will change some of the dynamics there.
What do you think about removing a top course to bring the height into more in line with our code?
That would be a good idea. That way he would have better slope to control the drainage too. I think that would actually help the structure.
Okay. And Stephanie, I know you did verify the ability to construct a fence on top of the other fence, and now the 10-foot movement from that wall, is that because of the 6-foot height or the 7-foot height of the wall?
Correct. So if you're going to put a fence on top of a wall, it has to be 6 feet or lower. So you're counting the two of them. If you're 10 feet away, you can do a 6-foot wall and a 6-foot fence. So you don't add it and make it 12 feet. So in order for him to do a 6-foot fence, you'd have to have a 6-foot wall, be 10 feet away, 6-foot fence.
Okay.
That's the way the code reads.
Does anybody have any issues with any other the steep slopes that are on the front of the property, near the structure, near the house, I mean? There are some minor grades that are over 35%. In the front to the left of the house, that part was excavated. Some trees were taken out and some rocks were taken out. But, I don't think there's too much remediation, or as long as the plantings would hold up the ground. I don't think there would be an issue with any runoff or anything, as long as he would be able to submit what he was going to put in there to hold back the dirt from eroding. Do you agree with that, George?
Yes, sir.
So do you see any issues with any of the slopes in the front of the house, front of the property, as it's adjacent to Travis Avenue? No, George? Uh-oh, you guys lost me.
I don't lose you.
Oh. All right, George, do you have any problems with the front of the structure as it's on Travis Avenue?
No, as your assessment was clear and correct. As long as they give us a plan showing what they're going to put back. It appears to be stable right now. It hasn't changed since I drove by it. So I agree.
All right. So why don't we do this? Jen, did you say you wanted to go back to? No, that was Eileen. Eileen says she wants to go out there.
Eileen, I'll go with you.
Okay,
Tracy will go out there. All right. So we're not gonna make a decision tonight. We're not gonna have another public hearing, obviously. We're not gonna have any issue with the steep slopes or any of the remediation that is on the Travis Avenue side. We're still gonna be discussing some options for the steep slopes in the back and the wall, whether it's removing one block and grading back and getting closer to 6 feet or not. And we're gonna have to, I'll ask George, or maybe the new building inspector can go out and look at some of the stuff that's on the western sides, and he can come up with some options. What do you think about that, George? You think it's in their wheelhouse?
Yes, the new building inspector's got a lot of experience, and his thoughts and his opinion would be helpful.
Okay. Obviously, we're not going to be able to do anything with snow on top of it to see what's there. All right. So, Stephanie, if you can tell us what this clock is going to be like, so we can make our decisions within the time frame. But we'll hold this application open until next month, and we'll discuss those options, which, the wall, the grading, and we're gonna have to tell us where the material came from for this property. I know you said, Mr. Calabro, you were gonna do that at the end, but I'd like to know where the material came from for your fill. I know you just didn't take it from the front of the property and put it in the back. There's a lot of yardage that got put in behind that to bring it up to 7 feet. That's a lot of fill. So if you could just let us know and show us the tickets where you got that stuff from, because like I said, when I looked at that fill that was along the face of the wall, it looked like something that came from a house that got bulldozed. It looked like the foundation of the kitchen. You know, there's a lot of stuff in there.
A lot of the stuff on the side they were referring to wasn't for me. Some of that they're way before I was. There's stuff there that I've been trying to clean up for the past 7 years.
Okay.
Pretty stuff behind, and I have the receipts. Is the 1-inch stone. You know,
What about all the other dirt though?
property? It's what I dug out of the front. There's between the 1-inch stone that I bought, and I have there's like 37 yards of it or plus, and what I took from the side when I dug out on the side of the property there where the tree stumps came down.
Okay. All right, so we'll hold this open until, does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Calabro or his applicants? All right, we'll hold this open until next month, and we'll, Tracy and Eileen will go look at it, and then we'll discuss it a little bit more. We won't make a decision this month, probably next month, and Stephanie will get back to us on the time frame which we have to do it. Okay?
Sean, before you guys go, just a quick question, Sean, if you don't mind, a logistical one. You were talking about having the new building inspector go and go look at the western side of the wall. Once he does that, can you have him contact me so that I can, so that Mr. Calabro and I can both be on the same page with respect to, that remediation?
Sure.
Okay.
Not a problem. As soon as he does it, I'll have him forward you guys the information.
Okay.
Obviously,
All
it's
right.
not going to be while there's snow on top of it because
Understood.
you can't see the stuff that came down into the fence
Right.
that's tied up against the trees. All right. All right, thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies. Everybody on the board, I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have Con Edison Substation briefing. I'm not sure if the new board members are aware, Con Edison wants to do some modifications in their transformer yard. We had originally felt that it was just a rehabilitation and modification of the existing moats. While viewing the prints and George looked at them, they are a lot more invasive to the transformer yard. And Con Edison was asking how they should proceed or what process we should go for. They're going to give us a brief overview, and based on their overview will be the determination as to if they need a site plan amendment or what process to go for. Marcus, the Con Edison representative is available?
I think Mr. Del Silva is on there. A couple of people on there. I think Mr. Del Silva, you can unmute yourself. And Gus, I don't know who's going to make the presentation.
Yep, I'll make the presentation, Marcus. So just quickly, I apologize. It looks like my camera's not working here. Just wanted to say thank you for getting us on the agenda here. Part of our team here, Gus Lee, Joe's the senior project manager for railroad construction. We have the contract it's a design build contract for Con Edison. We're doing a SPCC contract, which is spill prevention control and countermeasure. And we've procured the design engineer, STV Inc. We have Diana Molina and Joe Yemen on as well to answer any questions that may come up. As far as the brief overview for what we're doing on this project, Con Edison has a total of 4 transformer moats that are existing transformer moats. Currently, one has existing walls around the perimeter of the moat, and all 4 of these locations are basically, pervious soil in and around the moat. The point of our contract is to go in and excavate the soil and pour a concrete bathtub structure, which will, contain any oil spills from the transformers in the event, of a catastrophe. we're doing this at all four. So, scope of work includes excavation. We have some grounding work that we have to do as a part of the work that's going on there. We're going to pour concrete slabs and perimeter walls for this containment. And then we put in a steel beam and grading platform, which will act as a walking surface for Con Edison employees around the perimeter of the transformer moats. We do have a little bit of drainage work that we do. Sumps are installed at all the locations. Sump pumps are installed, and there's a hydrocarbon filter that gets installed as a part of this system. Any leaks, any oil that would get into the moat would eventually flow into these sumps, and this hydrocarbon filter would activate and would actually keep oil inside the moat. So that's basically the main step of the containment. Any rainfall that comes in would also flow to the sumps, but the way the hydrocarbon filters are designed, that flow is allowed to get pumped through the sump pump through this hydrocarbon filter and discharged back into the blue stone, so that it would go back into the groundwater. It's basically just a recharge. And it's pretty much the scope of our work.
So the size of these moats, is it going to be 50% of the capacity of the transformers, or is there a different figure that you guys use?
I believe it's 90% of the capacity. So we take the total design criteria is 90% of the capacity of the transformer. There's a firefighting water flow requirement that's provided by Con Edison's engineering group. And then there's a 25-year rainfall event also. So when you add up all the volume, that's essentially what we're holding. I think the largest of the four is just about 50,000 gallons.
Steve, small correction on that, but it's actually 150%. This is Diana Marie.
Oh, sorry, Dan.
Yeah, but the volumes of oil to be contained are all provided by Con Ed and based on the size of the transformer.
So, George, is the stormwater management law, that's for individual projects, or is it for projects that are adjoining each other? So they got 4 different transformers that are in different areas. They're going to be, there's obviously not going to be an acre for each one, but adding them together might be. So how does that factor in?
It's all on one property, so you're right. So it's the combined. It's not the individual.
Okay.
So I'll just jump in there quickly. Sorry, we have a total of, I think it's 6,000, just under 6,200 square feet that we're building. So it's shy of a fifth of an acre approximately.
So is it 6,000 square feet per transformer, or is it 6,000 square feet for all of the transformers?
All four total 6,166 square feet.
And that includes your trenching and your oil remediation and all of that?
Yeah, that number would go up a little bit higher, but it would be an insignificant increase. That's just the meat line volume of the final product.
Okay. So what do you think, George? I think they should just have to file a building permit, right? We don't need anything special. You think you need an EI?
No. The only thing is, you mentioned there's some walls. How tall are these walls?
Diana, do you know off the top of your head?
Sure. For 3 of the transformers, the walls actually do not go above the top of the existing transformer pads. So they're going to be at the same elevation. For most of these stations, the elevation, the grade is about 6 inches below the transformer pad, so it's not going to rise much higher than that. And for 1 of the 4, the walls are only going to be a foot higher than the transformer pad, so very short. Most of the containment in Con Ed is ensuring that most of the containment is below ground.
Okay, so from ground elevation down, what's your max height?
From ground elevation down, I think our max is 5 feet, or
5 feet.
4 feet. I'm sorry, 4 feet.
So
And the
there's,
vents are a little bit deeper than that.
okay.
So it's about 3 feet below grade. You're basically digging a moat.
Yep.
That's exactly what it is. They were building moats. 4 feet from the top of the transformer pad. So it's about, if the transformer pad is about 6 inches or a foot above grade, then we're 4 feet from that elevation.
It's about 3'8". It looks like is the deepest.
And how many cubic yards of material are you disturbing, roughly? How many? And then where is it going?
It looks like, George, it's about 800 cubic yards total, if I've done my math properly here. The material, Con Edison has standards for disposal of material. We take environmental samples and submit for approval for disposal at a Con Edison pre-approved facility. They have a number of them. This would probably be moved to Bayshore Recycling, which is actually in New Jersey, Central Jersey. So that's what we've been doing. As a part of this project, we have 21 total substations that we're doing this at, and this is what we've done for all 21, or what we will be doing for all 21.
And you manifest that soil?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, because that comes up a lot. Where soil comes and goes to is just mentioned in the last application as well. So
And it'll be mentioned again.
And it'll be mentioned again. Soil coming in and soil coming out is always a concern.
Okay.
Understood. We have documentation for all soil, both coming in and coming out. In this case, there's very little coming in.
And then what's the highest elevation of any structure that you're changing? Is it just all moats? Because I couldn't tell clearly from the plans if there was going to be anything above ground, significantly above ground.
Nope, these changes are all just to the existing moats. The tallest one, like Diana mentioned, 3 of the 4 are just, right at the same elevation as the transformer pad, the concrete pad that the transformer sits on. The one that's being modified here is transformer 5, and the top of that wall, there's currently a flood containment barrier that's in place at that location, and what we're doing is we're basically just pouring a concrete wall up to that flood containment barrier. So there's no net change in elevation from what's currently at that structure.
And as far as impervious area, how are you increasing, decreasing, or net zero?
Net zero, because all the water is just to be clear, we are pouring a lot more concrete where there's currently stone, but that water is basically, these moats act as retention basins, and then the water is slowly discharged right back into the ground, directly adjacent to the moats. So it's at least the way that we look at it is net zero, right? Because it doesn't, you're not affecting the flow at all. Any rainfall is going right back into the ground the same way that it's currently doing now.
So the gravel you have now is counted as impervious, is what you're saying?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, Diana, I don't know if you agree with that assessment.
I think we are increasing the pervious surfaces, right, by creating all of these mold slabs. In essentially 3 of the 4 transformer molds that we're building, there will be like exactly the scenario that Steve mentioned, where we're going to be draining directly to the adjacent gravel. And one of the 4, there's an existing drain that's connected to a skimmer tank, and that drain is going to stay. but yeah, in effect, we are increasing the pervious surfaces in the station.
So the question is, are you increasing the flow out of the?
No, we're not increasing it in any fashion, no.
Okay. So there's no the concern is any downstream properties being getting an increase in flows, but I think all this flows to your own wetlands as well. That's downstream. If I'm not mistaken.
I believe it flows over to the gas pipeline.
Yes.
So, with this, with these hydrocarbon filters, what are they? Are they like coalescing filters, or is it a water separation system you're putting in? Is mechanical or passive?
I'll let STV answer that.
It's simply separating the oil from the water and allowing the water to flow freely. And it has cartridges, right, that will fill up and will have to be maintained by Con Edison personnel on site. But there's, like I said, that's 3 out of the 4 transformers will have that system, and the other one will drain directly to the skimmer tank. But in the new mode, they're also installing petro plugs to make sure that any oil that leaks out of the mode is contained within the mode as much as possible, even before it hits the skimmer tank.
Okay. And the petro plugs are, once the oil touches the plug, it solidifies and stops the flow, right?
That's correct, yeah. That's the intent.
Okay. I have no further questions. So back to your statement earlier, this seems to be a building department can facilitate a permit for this.
Yeah, I don't think we need anything special. The filters wouldn't classify as an oil storage because it's a waste. It's not even real filtration system. It's basically a filter system. What it is,
yep.
So it's not like you're separating it and storing it into a tank or anything. It's staying all within the media of the filter itself. So you don't have to worry about transferring the fluids into any kind of other containment system.
Correct.
Is that my interpretation correct, Ms. Molina?
Yes, it is.
All right. So does any of the board members have a question? Or Stephanie, do you agree with George's assessment that it should just be a building department issue?
I do agree with that. And I don't have any questions myself.
All right. You're very quiet today, Stephanie.
Yeah, sometimes it's better that way.
Do any of the board members have any questions, or do they disagree with our assessment as per the as it pertains to the Con Edison Substation boat modifications?
When the concrete is poured, is there going to be epoxy coating painted over it, or some type of protector, or is it just?
Yeah, Jeffrey, the any existing concrete does we do apply a waterproofing to it. The new concrete, however, does not have any kind of coating on it, nothing like that. It's just just the new concrete that gets poured up against the existing concrete, and you waterproof the existing because that existing stuff. I think there's a concern there about potential leaking through that. The new concrete, there's no concern, so no further treatment needed.
So you're sealing up what's there and then pouring on top of it as another seal. So you're having like a double barrier.
Picture if you're talking about the existing transformer pad, you would have a vertical surface, and when we pour our slab, it gets poured up against that vertical surface. So right at that interface, we would waterproof, an overlap onto our new concrete, and then cover all of Con Edison's old concrete, so that everything is either brand new concrete with no cracks in it, or existing concrete, which is waterproof.
Okay. Anything else, Jeff?
And what type of grounding systems are you adding to it?
There's there's Con Edison has standard drawings and specifications for any grounding at all of their substations. The system as it's designed entails a 1-inch diameter braided copper cable grid that gets buried 2 feet below the transformer. So essentially anywhere that we're pouring new concrete, we dig a trench around the perimeter, drop a 1-inch copper cable around that perimeter with 4 copper ground rods in the corners. That gets backfilled. We pour the concrete slab on top, and then we have another grid, an upper loop grid that gets installed. It's the same exact thing, except this would lay on top of the new concrete slab, and both of those grids get attached to each other and tied into Con Edison's overall grounding grid, which again is the same exact system. It's just, you know, everywhere else. It's essentially just putting in a new grid for our transformer modes and attaching it to Con Edison's existing station grid.
Just to let you know, Mr. De Silva, Jeff is also the fire chief in the village of Buchanan. Maybe you guys, I don't know when the last time we did a drill or a walkthrough of the site, maybe after you do the modifications, you could show them the areas, because I know there are different trenches over there that house some of your cables that have the SF6 gas, or if you've already switched over from that. But maybe once the modifications are done, you could have the fire department go in there and look around and see what any changes are.
Sure, absolutely, we're willing to do that. As it relates to our work, I think these couple of locations that you're talking about, Sean, are outside of our scope, but you know, substation operations is there on a daily basis. I mean, I'm sure that they could show these areas off.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions?
No.
All right, so we'll refer Con Edison to our building department to file a building permit, and he'll navigate, our new building inspectors will navigate you through the permitting. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. We did just switch over to a new building inspector. There are 2 part-time people. They're there on Mondays and Fridays. I don't know if they'll be there tomorrow, but they should definitely be there on Friday. Or you could just call Marcus or the office, and they'll be able to direct you on the proper paperwork to fill out.
Yeah, no problem. You can reach out anytime. Thank you.
If there's nothing else for Con Edison, you guys can appreciate you coming and talking to us and looking for some direction.
Likewise, we appreciate the time.
You got it.
Thank you.
Okay, although there's nothing else on the agenda, Marcus, last week or a couple of weeks ago, sent out the overlay district proposed legislation with the modifications which were adopted by the village board at a workshop meeting. Part of the review process and approval process is to have the input from the planning board. And I'm not so sure if it also includes the zoning board, but I know that they specifically asked for the planning board input. I had previously gave my written input to the village board and we received a response from David Stallman in August, I believe. And I think all the new members have received a copy of both documents, actually all 3, the original draft, my response, David Stallman's response, and then the new draft legislation that was sent to us a couple of weeks ago. Does everybody have all of those documents available to them? Not for tonight. I mean, did everybody get everything? Yes? I see a couple of nods. Okay. So what the village board has asked is for written comments from the planning board. So what I was going to do, I would like you guys to email me any of your comments or concerns. I will draft together a letter with my comments and we'll read them off at the next meeting and discuss my comments, your guys' comments, so we can come up with one document to submit to the village board as the planning board. If you'd like, you guys could send individual ones, but I would like to come to a consensus on some of our concerns. So as a group, we can say this came from the planning board, not one individual or another. So you might have some of the same concerns that I have, or not, but I'd like to be able to coalesce some ideas to give the village board a response based on what the planning board feels. In their new draft legislation, they did put some things in there which I feel are zoning board issues. They've given the purview of the planning board some zoning issues where before you used to have to go to the zoning board for a zoning amendment or a variance such as height or density. They've given that purview to the planning board, which I don't believe is right, but I haven't really read the document that much. I just listened to it as they were discussing it. But if you guys could just email me over the next month any information which you would like to include into it, any questions you might have, so we can put together some text and discuss it next month and send it to the village board next month. I believe we're on a 45-day clock, Marcus, or a 60-day clock. Is that correct?
I'll let David answer that question. I think you're correct, but I'll let David answer.
Sean, I believe the code says that you've got 45 days unless you come up with a different arrangement with the village board of trustees.
Okay, I'm sure that they would give us more time if we wanted.
Absolutely.
But if we can come in within the time frame, I'd like to try to follow as many rules as we can, because you hate to keep pushing things out and the next thing you know, you're 3 months down the road and you forget what you were actually talking about.
Sure.
So I'd like to try and strike when the iron's hot. So if the rest of the board members could help me out and submit their stuff to me, and so we can put it together, and then I'll send out a draft to you guys and you can bounce it back, but we'll definitely discuss it at the next meeting. Okay?
Okay.
Everybody good?
Yep.
All right, so if there's nothing else, I'd like to...
Wait, Sean?
Yes.
You have 62 days from the closure of tonight's public hearing on site plan amendment and the steep slopes. So you have another meeting or two before you have to make a decision on that. Just wanted you to know. And also, I wanted to ask you, as the chairman, do you want me to circulate a memo? Because there's new people, I don't know how much, digging into the code they did, but we're dealing with a steep slopes law, we're dealing with fencing and heights of fences and walls, and I could probably put that pretty clearly and just refer to certain areas of the code.
Sure, that would be definitely helpful to point it out, because we've been dealing with it a lot.
Yeah.
For the new members who aren't familiar with our code book, it's relatively easy now that it's online. You can just go to the Village of Buchanan website and you go on the lower left-hand side. I think it's the second to the last. You just click on code and you'll have a search bar, and you can put in any search term you want and it'll bring you to the individual codes. You just have to scroll back and forth because it takes you right to the word you're looking for. And you can read all the different codes. Some of them are cross-referenced. You might have to jump from code to code with the same search terms, but there's a lot of things that go to different codes. Let me just put it that way. There's a lot of different laws that interact with each other. So just because you come up with one search term doesn't mean that it doesn't apply to another code. So if Stephanie could just throw something together and email that out to you so that you see what we're talking about, that'd definitely be helpful.
Okay.
All right. If there's nothing else, I just wanted to say Merry Christmas to everybody. I appreciate everybody coming and engaging and with the applicants. I know we haven't had a lot of action over the last couple of years, but I think we're finding out why we didn't have a lot of action these last couple of months. Let's put it that way. So I don't want to say anything else about it. We're just going to move forward and try and do the job as best as we can and correct the issues as they come up. So, what, you're chuckling there, Stephanie?
Sorry. See, that's why I mute myself most of the time.
All right, so I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, and we'll talk to you guys, everybody, next month.
Happy holidays.
Have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn and stay safe.
You too.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thanks.
Good night.
Good night.
Night all. Be well.
Night.